You can go through the Bible real fast. It's not an issue. You'll still get to the point. But God went out of his way. He really went out of his way to make it so ironclad that for somebody today, forgive me when I say this, but there's no other way for me to say this. The most asinine statement I think I could hear is when somebody says the Bible is written by men. Every book is written by men. But the Bible has proof for its reliability like not all the volumes of books in the world have. And we went through this many times. So here Joseph just orders his whole staff, because now he's second in command. In fact, this kingdom is the mighty kingdom of its time. And you know, Pharaoh was so incredibly powerful. Most powerful man on the face of the planet. And he told Joseph that you're going to be in command. In other words, when I'm not sitting on the throne, you're Pharaoh. Unbelievable. So he has the staff that attends him, and he orders the staff out of the room. And he has this enormous emotional release that he's probably been holding on to for 22 years. And he tells them something absolutely stunning. He says, don't grieve. Because they don't know him as their brother. They know him as the most powerful man in this kingdom that they're dependent on. Now they realize it's his brother. What are they thinking? He's going to want revenge like any other normal human being would. Any other normal human being, at least make it difficult for them. But no, he does the exact antithesis of that. He says, it's okay. God overruled it for good. Amen. God used you. Hallelujah. Amen. And now because of that, he kept his brothers alive, which means he kept the Jewish line alive, which means he kept the Messianic hope alive, which means because of this, we're able to be saved. Amen. One verse I want you to see, you know, every year when I read this, different things pop out. I'm not trying to create something that's not there, but look at just verse 1. It says, at last, Joseph could no longer control his feelings. Why? What happened at this point? Why he could no longer control his feelings? In Genesis chapter 37, 22 years ago, his brother Judah, cold, callously, ruthlessly, like a thug, sells him into slavery. And then goes on to smear his robe. I mean, heartless. Heartless what he did to his father. Let me read you one verse that I just saw last night when Bern was putting together Shabbat dinner. I mean, I know this verse, but I don't want to paraphrase it. It's in the 37th chapter when they came back to report to his father. And the 35th verse, it says, though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, meaning all his 11 boys and Dinah, his daughter, was trying to comfort Jacob, he refused all consolation. Like, don't. And he said, quote, no, this is right in the Torah, I will go down to the grave to my son mourning. There is nothing worse in Jewish thinking than going to your child's funeral. Nothing. Some people have experienced it, so I don't want to bring up a bad memory. But by the same token, you'll never forget. All the faith in the world won't fill that hole in your heart. So he's like, I'm dead. I'm a dead man. There's no reason for me to go on. I mean, Judah wasn't even concerned that this is what he was doing. Bad enough that he did this to his brother out of just jealousy. Guys, jealousy is poison. Stop looking on the internet. It's going to bury you. Jealousy will rot your bones. Jealousy will cause you to covet, and covet will cause you to lie, steal, commit adultery. That's what coveting leads to, all those others. And jealousy leads to coveting. Just, I'm not a big fan of quoting secular people, but Steve Jobs says life is so short, Don't waste it living somebody else's life. So many people aren't even happy in their faith. How in the world, though, this is my thinking when I first read this. How in the world is God going to bring kings from those loins? Just a cold-blooded, ruthless murderer, not concerned about his dad's heartache and heartbreak. And it's prophesied in Genesis 17:6 and Genesis 17:16 and Genesis 35:11. Before this, it's prophesied that kings are going to come from one of the tribes, which we know is Judah, based on Jacob praying over Judah at the very end of Genesis. And then the King of Kings. How is he going to bring it from that guy would be my question. But Judah miraculously has a change of heart. Miraculously. And pleads for his brother's life more than willing to give up his own. No greater love than a man laid down his life for his brother. I want to read to you, I know it's going to take a little bit of time, some verses, and then you're going to understand why at last Joseph couldn't take it anymore. He was going to burst. He couldn't take it, because this is the conversation that Judah, the same guy 22 years ago who sold him into slavery, has with, now he's thinking this is the king of this Egyptian empire, basically. I'm reading Genesis 44. I don't have it on the screens because I didn't put it on the screens because it just came. Verse 18, it says, Then Judah approached Joseph, because Joseph said, you got to leave Benjamin with me. He's testing him. Guys, God is testing us all the time. Constantly. Constantly we are being tested. This life is a big test. Judah approaches Joseph and says, Please, my lord, let your servant say something to you privately. And don't be angry with him, begging him, pleading, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, meaning Joseph asked his servants, the brothers, do you have a father or a brother? We answered, my lord. They weren't going to lie because they figured he was somewhat of a soothsayer and he would find out. We have a father who is an old man and a child of his old age, a little one whose brother is dead. Can you imagine? He doesn't know it's his brother. And he's telling this story. I mean, Joseph must have been like, how did he contain himself? He has a little one whose brother is dead, meaning Benjamin, so that of his mother's children, you notice he only says one mother, Rachel. Of his mother's children, he alone is left. And his father loves him because his father loved Rachel. But you said to your servants, bring him down to me so that I can see him. We answered, my lord, the boy can't leave his father. If he were to leave his father would die. Look at the change, man. Guys, I do love the South. There's a lot I love. And whether I love the South or not is not an issue. Who cares if I love the South? My opinion doesn't count, just like your opinion doesn't count about the North. Know this deeply. But there is so much gray in Southern religion. You've got to be born again. You weren't a nice person before you were born again. Don't think you were. Not having a beer, not smoking a cig, and not having premarital sex doesn't make you the Messiah. There has to be a massive change. Massive. People that you didn't love, you fall in love with. Guys that are getting saved in Iran, miraculously being saved. The first thing that happens is they fall in love with the Jewish people. How do you explain that unless it's a spiritual phenomenon? So how do you being black and getting saved still not liking white folk? And how are you white getting saved and still not liking black folk? Explain this one to me. Rabbi, you didn't live through it. Oh, get over it, man. You didn't live through what I've lived through. Nobody's been persecuted more than the Jewish people. Nobody. Demographers say we should have 350 million Jews today. We got 14 million. How did that happen? We went up to your servant, my father, and told him what my Lord has said. But when our father said, go again and buy us some food, they're starving. We answered, we can't go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go down. Meaning, Dad, he's not going to give us anything. He's going to take off our head if we don't bring Benjamin. Because we can't see the man's face unless our younger brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, he's telling him this whole story. Meanwhile, you know what Joseph's thinking? My dad's alive. My dad's alive. I want to see my dad. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. Imagine. Guys, stop reading scripture like a theologian. See it, feel it, taste it. Put yourself in the story. How many times have I said this to you guys? How many times? It's just dry religion. Today we have what I call dry-eyed Christianity. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. The one went out from me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I haven't seen him since. Now, if you take this one away from me too, and something happens to him, you'll bring my gray hair down to Sheol with grief, meaning I'll die. I lose Benjamin, I'm gone. So now, if I go to your servant, my father, and the boy isn't with us, seeing how his heart is bound up with the boy's heart, when he sees that the boy isn't with us, he will die. And your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol with grief, the grave, not hell. For your servant himself guaranteed his safety. What? Judah guaranteed it? The father laughed. You're guaranteeing it? You? He doesn't know he took out Joseph. He just knows he's not trustworthy. I said, if I fail to bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame before my father forever. Therefore, I beg you. He's on his knees. He's at his feet. He's weeping at his feet. Let your servant stay as a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go up with his brothers. What? Do you see this magnanimous change? For how can I go up to my father if the boy isn't with me? I couldn't bear to see my father so overwhelmed by anguish. This is, guys, obviously you're seeing the passion in my heart, but it's not some contrived, passion that people sometimes have to do. I can't believe it. From selling his brother into slavery to becoming a slave himself. Heartless to heartfelt. Selfish to selfless. It's like going from the projects to the palace. It's as if he was born again. Guys, it's like he's born again. Born again just doesn't happen with a prayer. It's a whole new heart with God's ways, and all of a sudden you're totally different. And people can't believe it. Your friends, your family, they're like, what happened to you? This, my friends, is God's grace. This is God's amazing grace. And if that has never happened to you, then guess what? You're not born again. I don't care how many times you go to church. And I don't care how much you do. Now, we could stop there, which I'm sure there's at least a few people that would say amen. And it would be more than enough. More than enough. However, I would like to look at something called typology. And you're probably familiar with it. If you're not, I will familiarize you. Typology is the study of types of prefigurative symbols in scriptural literature, especially in scriptural literature. So, Joseph, in the whole Old Testament, was more like Yeshua than anybody else. And I mean way more, not a little more. Way more. He was a type and shadow of Messiah Yeshua, which is what a lot of the Old Testament is all about. It's supposed to point us. All roads lead to Yeshua. The question is, are we justified in looking for Messiah in the Old Testament? Is it just some goofy thing we do to go, people go, wow, that's pretty cool, Rabbi. You got some insight. I'm way past that nonsense. I'm way past that nonsense. It's nonsense to try to impress people. Nonsense. Because God knows you're trying to do that, so you just lost. But if you ask me, are we justified in looking for the Messiah in the Old Testament? I'd say, you bet we are. And how do I know? Look at Luke 24, just 3 verses. It says, he said to them, that's Yeshua. He's walking on this Emmaus road, 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they're talking to him. They don't recognize him. Sound familiar? They don't recognize who he is. And like, are you the only one that doesn't know what happened here? I mean, they say he resurrected. Some of the women told us, but I don't know. And he's like, you don't know? So he says to them, foolish people, so unwilling to put your trust in everything the prophet spoke. Look, before you listen to these new wave aftershave knuckleheads on the internet that call themselves prophets, know this, most of them, if not all of them, work for a non-profit organization. Stick with the prophets of old because there's still prophecies that haven't come to pass that you need to know about. Didn't the Messiah have to die like this before entering his glory? He's chiding them. Then starting with Moshe, what's that? The Torah, and all the prophets, he explained to them the things that can be found throughout the Tanakh concerning himself, the Old Testament. So Yeshua has this Bible study with them that I'm sure you would like to have been part of. He begins at Genesis and continues through all the books of the prophets. Not every prophecy. I don't think he went over 333 prophecies because, they might still be there. But enough. So the Lord reviews all the scriptures which refer to himself as Messiah. So if he did it, clearly I have a right to do it. But as a Jew who believes in Jesus, I'm always looking for Messiah in the Old Testament. And I see him on every page. What a crazy Bible study. But you know what? We have the same Old Testament, don't we? The same one he was referring to, we have it, right? And we have the same Holy Spirit to teach us, don't we? So here goes. I made a top 10 list. Can you put that in there? Thanks. Give me an extra $1. There's as many as 100, believe it or not. Some of them are really far-reaching, but 100 similarities between Joseph and Yeshua. I just made a top 10 list. No big deal. This doesn't have to be your list. You can have your own top 10. You could have top 15, whatever you want. Here's mine, okay? Number one. Both were born miraculously. And I'm giving you know how I don't really dislike taking things out of context, but it would be so long. We'd be here forever. So you can go home and read in context. Genesis 30, 22, 23 says, Then God took note of Rachel and heeded her prayer and made her fertile. That's miraculous. She could not have a baby. There was, today we have, science sometimes to help out. And that's wonderful. This is way back in the days before fertility specialists. She conceived and had a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. Matthew 1:18, here's how the birth of Yeshua, the Messiah, took place. When his mother Miriam was engaged to Yosef, before they were married, she was found to be pregnant from the Ruach HaKodesh. Both were born miraculously. 2, both were their father's favorite sons. Genesis, now Israel loved Yosef the most of all his children because he was the son of his old age and he made him a long-sleeve robe. By the way, I don't know, just a side note, I don't know where we got this rainbow robe from. Do you? You've been spewing that garbage forever. Where? Pas in the Hebrew is not a rainbow robe. It's a long-sleeve robe. Why do you think his father had to look it over to really determine if it was his son's? If it was a rainbow robe, it would have been a no-brainer. Rabbi, how do you think about these things? I have nothing better to do. I have absolutely no life. None. It's a sad state of affairs. Matthew 3:16-17, as soon as Yeshua had been immersed, he came up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was open. He saw the Spirit of God coming down upon him like a dove, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. I am well pleased with." Number 3, they were both hated by their brothers. Genesis, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk with him in a civil manner. You ever hate somebody like that? Sure you do. Come on. Stop it. You see that guy coming, you're like, oh, not that guy. Just know somebody's probably saying that about you. Matthew 13:55-57. Isn't he the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Miriam, and his brothers Yaakov, Yosef, Shimon? Look, I'm not knocking any religion, but to think that Mary is without sin is the most ludicrous statement I think I've ever heard. How could she be without sin? There's only one, right? We all said there's only one. Oh, except for, no. And they took offense at him. But Yeshua said to them, the only place people don't respect a prophet is his own hometown. Has anybody experienced this? My mom, I miss my mom so much. You know, I still haven't looked at a picture of her. It is almost 5 years since she died. Do you know how disturbed that is? How disturbed I am? I haven't even looked at a picture. New Year's Day, before I came here to anoint the thing, I went to call her to wish her Happy New Year. How sad is that? We were close, but she said to me, Gregory, I can't tell the old Jewish women that you're a rabbi. I said, why? She goes, they'll have a stroke. There was a lot of old Jewish women in my neighborhood. My neighborhood was, in the 70s, all the Jews started becoming affluent. You know, doctors, lawyers, that kind of thing. And so they moved to the burbs. But my father was the furthest thing from affluence, so we stayed in the project. So the only Jews that were left were the Jews on fixed income. So those were my Jewish friends. You know, 80-year-olds. Next, 4, they both had their deaths being conspired. Genesis 37, they spotted him, that's Joseph, in the distance, and before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. It wasn't spontaneous. Matthew 26, then the head Kohanim, priests, and the elders of the people gathered in the place of Caiaphas, the Kohen Hagadol. Caiaphas, the high priest, who, by the way, he was not supposed to be the high priest. John the Baptist was. That's why he called him a brood of vipers. They made plans to arrest Yeshua. What does that even mean? I mean, Daniel Stern, you are so brilliant, but sometimes, and have him put to death. Both conspired. 5, both became servants. You know what, I've been crying all morning. Let me just, I shouldn't do this in front of you, right? Oh boy, I'm so real, it's pathetic. Both became servants. Genesis 39, Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelim, the Ishmaelites, who had brought him there. Joseph pleased him as he served him, and his master appointed him manager of his household. He entrusted all his possessions to Joseph. This is a beautiful verse, Matthew 20:28. It says, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. Can you imagine if this was your and mine? If this was our mission statement? I'm here to serve and to give. Serve and to give. Serve and to give. We do just the opposite, a lot of us. Not here per se, because there are a lot of servants here serving. And there are a lot of people giving online and here. I mean, we are blessed to have real deal believers in this house. It's amazing to me. Both were sold for the price of a slave. Genesis 37. So when the Midian merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for half a pound of silver shekels to the Ishmaelim who took Joseph onto Egypt. Matthew 26, then one of the 12, the one called Yehuda from Kiriot, went to the head Kohanim and said, what are you willing to give me if I turn Yeshua over to you? Which is the same thinking Judah had. Judah said, why kill him? Let's make a buck. They counted out 30 silver coins and gave them to Yehuda. Next, both were not recognized. Genesis 42, Yosef recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. Luke 24, that same day, two of them were going towards a village about 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus. As they talked and discussed, Yeshua himself came up and walked along them, but something kept them from recognizing him. We're almost there. Number 8, both were united with their father. Genesis 46, Yosef prepared his chariot, went up to Goshen. That's, by the way, Goshen was in the northeast of Egypt. To meet Israel, his father, he presented himself to him, embraced him, and wept on his neck for a long time, 22 years worth. Then Israel said to Yosef, now I can die. Isn't that beautiful? I've seen your face. You know, with Yeshua, it says in Mark 16, so then after he had spoken to them, the Lord Yeshua was taken up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God. I don't think his father said, now I can die. I think he said, now I can breathe. And he accomplished the goal that God sent him. Just, you know, if anybody would ever hear, well done, good and faithful servant, it was Yeshua. Both became royalty. Genesis 41, Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, had him clothed with fine linen with a gold chain around his neck, and had him ride in the second best chariot. And they cried before him, bow down! Thus he placed him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Amazing. Matthew 2, after Yeshua was born in Bethlehem in the land of Yehuda during the time when Herod was king, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the newborn king of the Jews? Why? We have come to worship him. Period. And last but not least, both became saviors. Genesis 45, God sent me ahead of you to ensure that you will have descendants on earth and to save your lives in a great deliverance. And John 3, 16, 17, and 17 is so important. I know everybody knows 16 all too well, especially if you were raised here. For God so loved the world that he gave his only and unique Son so that everyone who trusts in him may have eternal life instead of being utterly destroyed. And this is the 17th verse. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world. Sometimes we get saved and we become Messiah's police. It's lunacy. Saved by the grace of God, and all of a sudden you're going to dictate who's in and who's not. But rather so that through him the world might be saved. That's why he came. Now, I would like to finish up our little reading here with just the prophetic piece, because although there's a beautiful story about Judah and a change of heart and what it means to be born again, and that's beautiful in its own right, we did that. I want to show you the prophetic piece, because I know there's people out there that love Israel. But do you realize you can love Israel and not really care about the Jewish people? Israel and the Jewish people are one and the same. There's nothing that separates them. Why are you loving Israel? It's a country. I mean, I love Italy, but I'm not going to stick my neck out for her. The Amalfi Coast is beautiful. Rome is really interesting historically. Florence, nothing like it. But you can't love the nation. Yeshua didn't come to die for a nation. He came to die for people. So here you have it from Genesis. This is a big piece of prophecy. It says, Yosef said to his brothers, please come closer. And they came close, and he said, I am Yosef, Ani Yosef in the Hebrew, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But don't be sad that you sold me into slavery here, or angry at yourselves, because it was God who sent me ahead of you to ensure that you will have descendants on earth and to save your lives in a great deliverance. He kissed all his brothers, which is just beautiful. Listen, it is wonderful to be forgiven, but it is just as wonderful to forgive. Guys, we're believers. This is what we do. We bless those that curse us. We bless those that persecute us. It's not something we just read that was written 2,000 years ago. We forgive. Rabbi, it's hard. Okay, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. There's a lot of hard things that we still should do. But with the power of the Holy Spirit, nothing is impossible. Nothing. If anybody had a gripe, if anybody had a bone to pick, it's this guy. Yes. He kissed all his brothers and wept on them. After that, his brothers talked with him. Okay, Ani Yosef, he says, it's okay. Don't be sad, because it was God's plan from the beginning of time. I mean, don't you see it, guys? You would have died. The famine was coming. God sent me here, and he's preserved you to preserve the Messianic line. It's all about preserving the Messianic line. No Jews, no Jesus. No Jews, no Jesus. No Jews, no Bible. No Jews, no monotheism. Why do you think they're hated so much? I mean, the news came here to interview me. I spent a half an hour with the young lady explaining to her spiritually why anti-Semitism is going to be on the rise, and nothing. They don't want that. They want, hey, we're going to fight back, and we're going to increase security. Okay, right. That's your answer. Get another guy with a gun. The Jews will always be hated. They brought the world monotheism. Satan can't stand God. See, Satan's God's enemy, but God is Satan's enemy. You've got to understand Satan's thinking. He hates God, and he hates the people of God, the chosen people of God, which are the Jews. You've got books like the Protocols of Zion, people reading this book and believing that Jewish people on Passover take a Gentile little boy and kill him to use the blood for matzah. They believe this. Millions and millions and millions of people believe there was no Holocaust. I had an ignoramus once say to me in the projects, he goes, "You're Jewish, right?" "Yes." "You get bar mitzvahed when you're 13? "Yes." "The government gives you 10 grand, right?" "Well, if that's true, you owe me 10 grand if there's any government official watching." Jews have all the money. Really? Check the Fortune 50. It's all blue bloods. Asinine statements that people, smart, intelligent people, repeat with no facts. Monotheism. You'd be cutting your kids and throwing them in the fire. The Bible, they were trusted with the oracles of God. Yeshua, he said, salvation of the Jews. How could you have no connection with the Jews when Yeshua says, I was birthed of the Jews? It's not past tense. It's not that he was Jewish. Some of your denominations, 1905, 1762, stuff happened before that. You got to go back to the original. The book of Acts. It's weird worshiping on Saturday. What do you think they did the first 325 years? You're weird. You're weird for not embracing the truth. I'm not weird. I'm so tired of it. I've never made this place about food and days. Some have, not me. But how are you going to thwart it when the book of Daniel says that the spirit of the Antichrist will come and change God's calendar? Rabbi, does it matter what day we worship? I could care less what day you worship. Just don't call Sunday the Sabbath. You worship on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, heck, any day you want. But you're in no position to change it. The only person that could have changed it was God. And until you show me where he changed it, I'm going to be here on Shabbat. You're stirring a bee's nest. It's got to come out. We got to have conversation. Just leave it alone. Let sleeping dogs lie. Sleeping dogs wake up and they bite you. Rabbi, you're going to get taken out one day. Yes, I might. But I'll tell you right now, I'd rather die a martyr's death than from an aneurysm. God will never leave nor forsake Israel. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. That's Hebrew for I won't let you go and I won't drop you. Who was he talking to? He wasn't talking to a bunch of Methodists. He was talking to the Jews. And it's repeated where? In the New Testament. Hebrews 13:5. Who is he talking to in Hebrews? Give you a guess. Your security is in their existence. If he denies his wife, he could deny us. You meet somebody, they've been married 5 times, think about it. You could be his future ex-wife. Behavior predicts behavior. People can have a change. God will never leave them nor forsake them. Period. But we as a body of Messiah, we've left them and forsaken them. I'm not telling you you got to become Jewish because there's no way you can. That's biology. But I'm telling you, you are Judeo-Christian, and their history has become your history due to the engraftedness of your faith.
Amen.
Let's look at the prophetic piece. Zechariah, I picked 4 verses. Please read this in its entirety, but I want to show you something with these 4 verses, if I may. It says, I ran them together. I will whistle for them and gather them, and I will pour out on the house of David and on those living in Jerusalem a spirit of grace and prayer, and they will look to me whom they pierced. They will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. I told you there's no more pain like that. They will be in bitterness on behalf, like the bitterness for a firstborn son. I didn't make this up, when I tell you about going to your kid's funeral. It's in the scriptures. When that day comes, a spring will be opened up for the house of David and the people living in Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity. Then Adonai will be king over the whole world. On that day, Adonai will be the only one, and his name will be the only one. If you go home and look at this, I'm telling you, you will see Yom Teruah, you will see Yom Kippur, and you will see Sukkot. You will see them fulfilled, and you'll see the start of the millennial reign of Yeshua. These are the feasts that have yet to be fulfilled, but they will. They will. God has not forgotten his people. No way. The church might have, but he hasn't. Thank God. Just like there was 7 years of famine in Joseph's days, there will be 7 years of tribulation in Yeshua's day. And once again, and let me repeat, once again, the Father's favorite son will save his brothers when they hear, Ani Yeshua, don't grieve, I'm here to save you. And just as a side note, if you want to know why the Jews don't recognize him, because you done absconded him and changed him. Why didn't his brothers not recognize Joseph? And why did Joseph recognize his brothers? Joseph became an Egyptian. They cut his hair, they cut his beard, they shaved his head. They put on a little skirt on him and snake ringlets on his arm. They didn't recognize him. Yeshua today, he's not Jewish. He's blonde hair, blue-eyed, eating freaking bread on Passover. Rabbi, you're difficult. You sound frustrated. Almost angry. Yes, yes, yes. I admit it. Guilty as charged. Because nobody's telling it. It's like some hidden stuff that you got to go to the Himalayas to talk to a Swami to find out about. It's right here. Well, what do you say we end on a good note? There's a verse at the end of Genesis that's stunning. It's very similar to a verse in the New Testament that everybody loves in Romans 8:28, where it talks about, nothing will separate us, and then it's at that crescendo, God brings good out of all things. And he does. He does. I'm amazed. I am amazed. Every time I come in here, I'm amazed, not because of the building, because I can't believe what I'm doing. I can't believe what I'm doing. I just can't believe that I'm preaching the gospel. I just can't believe it. It's crazy to me. Just crazy. But Genesis 50:20 says this. You meant it to do me harm. Not the enemy. People will do you harm. People. Just like God uses us to help save people, he uses people to destroy people. I'm sure we all have experienced this. But don't you be part of the problem, be part of the solution. Yes. You meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, so that it would come about as it is today with many people's lives being saved. Can you imagine? He was so elated that he was used to save thousands and thousands and thousands of people. This is our God, guys. This is our God. Genesis 50:20. Transforming evil into good and ultimately overruling sin at the cross, whereby many, many people have been kept alive. Hallelujah, 1,000 times over. I'm going to try, and I perish the thought that I can even accomplish it, but I feel led. Next week, I want to recognize a lot of people that do a lot of work here. I want you to put a name with a face with a name. I'm sure they don't want the recognition. It doesn't matter. I want people to know who to go to. You see, we're overwhelmed. Denise, Roxanne, and I, we're overwhelmed. Just are. And it's sometimes hard to hire people because I'm a guy that likes to get 40 hours a week out of somebody and then some. And people just don't work 40 hours a week anymore. They just don't. There's these jobs in the church and I think in the federal government too, if I'm not mistaken, where even though you get paid for 40 hours, you don't work 40 hours. And I'm a fan that, what? If I see somebody sitting around for 3 hours playing video games, that's it. They're gone. They're gone. So I want to put a name with a face only because this way you don't have to necessarily call us. You can go right to the person. They're heading up the ministry. That's how we operate here. They're anointed. They're called. They need to get with God and figure out what they need for their ministry. If I can help them, I'm more than available. More than available. But that's their baby. And God's going to tell them what to do with that ministry before he'll tell me what to do with that ministry. So I want to do that, but I also want to go over a message that's going to take about 2 weeks. In 2020, I have to back up a little bit. So we're going to have people preaching once a month. It'll always be the last week of the month, except if there's a fifth Shabbat. It's not that I'm skating. It's not that I'm over. It's not. I was told by God to go after these 5 guys. I was told. They're gifted. And so when God told me, I had a meeting with them, and then I asked them to write to me, do you think it's of God? I didn't tell them God told me, do you think? And the emails was stunning. Just stunning. It was so obvious to me. Also, I have a friend now that's going to be writing to the people online. I can't keep up. I can't do cyber counseling. I can't keep up with Ethiopia and Kenya and Israel and wheelchairs and the synagogue and the people. It's impossible, guys. Some of you got 2 kids and it's too much. So I'm just gonna put in place some things that God has told me to put in place. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here and more than happy to be here. But I want to go over in the next 2 weeks a message about 2020. I don't look at the internet, but a pastor told me that there's all these messages going on now about 2020. We need God's vision. How did you think of that? It's amazing. Blows me away. But I have a specific message for Beth Yeshua for 2020 that I'd like to do next week and probably the week after. But I don't, there's no way I could tell you how much I love you. And there's no way I could ever tell you. I mean, these are cheap words, I get it. But when you're going through stuff, I'm really, really sad. So sad that my wife has to tell me, you can't let it ruin your life, Greg. You always do it. This is what she says to me. I come home, I go, burn. And then she goes, you can't, Greg. You can't. You've done this your whole life. And then the kids look at you and they know, we can't talk to Dad right now. And then you go into this depression. But I don't know how to balance it. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to be a professional? What I don't understand is why I cry sometimes over marriages and situations here that the people involved aren't crying over. That's what always amazes me. I'm like, God, I just know them. They're kind of like strangers. Even if I've known them 10 years, I don't live with them. Why am I crying out to you and begging you? And they're okay with, wow. So, it's words. But I've been here 18 years, and I think I've have more than words, I just want you to know there's nobody here that goes through something that doesn't affect myself and Bernadette adversely. And there's nobody here that something good doesn't happen for that I'm happy for. Like really happy, So I hope This is a special place. You guys are not fly-by-night. I'm telling you, I've been to so many places. I've preached so many places. And there's those people, those pillars, I call them. Oh, she's a prayer warrior. Oh, he's a servant. Every time the church doors open, he's there. I can look around the room and declare that everybody I know is like totally sold out and nuts about God. And you know you're nuts about God because you think about him a lot. You're looking for him, not just in the Bible. You're looking for him. You're trying to see, what is he saying? What is he doing? What do I need to do? God, what are you saying? What does this mean? Lord, I'm struggling. Help me to keep loving you. I don't want to not love you because you're so great. That's beautiful. That is absolutely stunning. And I think that's who you are. I can't speak about others in other churches. It's not my business. It's not for me to know. But I think that's who you are. And I think you need to give yourself credit. I think what you need to do, and take it from somebody who doesn't do it well, it's okay to see how far you have to go. It's okay to fail and maybe beat yourself up a little bit, but you have to see how far you've come. You have to. Some of you have come so far. I've seen it. I've watched it. I've watched people come here and they got an okay faith, and then, man, they're fired up and they're reading the Bible with their kids and with their wife, and they're praying and they're serious about the Lord, and they're sharing the Lord with people, and they're serving and doing. You've changed. Don't ever let the enemy tell you you're the same. Don't listen to him. Don't negotiate with him. Don't even curse him. Have nothing to do with him. Spend time with your Father. He is crazy about you. Think about it. If he was willing to give the best he had, I know we get knocked around, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why did the worst thing happen to the best person? Amen. If he was willing to do that for, you name it, serial killers, pedophiles, I don't care, whatever your worst list is, how much more now that you are absolutely, positively his child? You will never be able to love yourself the way God loves you. Never. But you're not as bad as you think. You're just not. I'm looking at quality people, man. Loving people, people doing things for other people, people who legitimately care, people who feel other people's pain. That makes you special. Okay? And I am darn glad to be part of it. Let's stand together.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Judy. And I'm sure there's some kind of gift in that card, and that's good, because Bernadette's away for the weekend, and I just don't even know where the frying pan is. I'm the worst. It's unbelievable. She said to me the other day, she says, "You don't know how to do a wash, do you?" I go, "Yeah, I do." She goes, "Go ahead, press the right button." I was like, I can't, right? I'm busy right now. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace in the name of the Prince of all peace, Yeshua. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Yo'er Adonai panav elecha v'hunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. I love you guys. Shabbat shalom.